Mr. Mayor, thank you. I've been advised that the streaming has started, and it is 8:59. You may begin your meeting.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Good morning, Council. Good morning, SLT and residents joining us today. I see that we have quorum, so I call this regular council meeting of August 14th in session. As usual, at this time, we ask all those that may, please rise for the national anthem. Thank you. And next, we have Councillor Nesnick will be reading the land recognition statement.
Good morning. We begin this meeting by acknowledging the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe people, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendships of Indigenous peoples.
Thank you, Councillor. I turn to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. We are now on the approval of the agenda, and I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrandt, seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that the agenda for August 14th, 2024 regular meeting of council be adopted as circulated. To you, Mr. Mayor, for comment.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion, Council? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Seeing none opposed. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are now on the disclosure of pecuniary interests, and you can ask if any councillor has a disclosure to make.
Thank you. After viewing the agenda, does any councillor have a pecuniary interest or general nature thereof to declare? Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes, item 14.2.2, soccer field maintenance report. I have a relative on the soccer board.
Okay, you don't play soccer, Council?
No.
Thank you. But I ask the clerk to please note that.
It is so noted. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does bring us to our delegations. Our first delegation is Mr. Jim Jeffs regarding cannabis odor unit threshold. And I will just remind the delegate that he does have 5 minutes to speak and appear before council, and he may come up to the podium. There is just a button on the microphone that you would click, and when it turns red, you are good to go, sir.
And Mr. Jeffs, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Mayor Junkin, for allowing me to do this. So, Mayor Junkin, councillors, staff, and fellow residents. When I read the Deputy Mayor Wink's recommendation, there were really two parts that just sort of jumped out at me. And the first was a statement that the Odor Industries Nuisance Bylaw sets an odor threshold based on known industry standards for acceptable odor levels. And from what's happened at meetings, that's perplexing. I can expand on that, but then I'll go over the 5 minutes and Mayor Junkin will tell me to shut up and sit down. So you can ask me about that at the end of my presentation. Now, the second was directing staff to consult the town's odor expert to obtain professional insight and recommendations on appropriate odor levels. Staff has already consulted the town's odor expert, but they did not follow his recommendations. The following excerpts from the minutes of the cannabis control meetings will show that Phil Gerard recommended 1 or 2 odor units, but staff did not agree. January 8th, 2020, Tino O'Hara reviewed the amendments and it was noted that input from Phil Gerard is being sought regarding frequency that a facility exceeds 2 odor units. January 15th, 2020, Tino O'Hara requested staff's comments on the draft odorous industry nuisance bylaw in order for the committee to move forward. D. Cribbs noted concerns of staff relate to definition of adverse effect, definition of vicinity, phase-in of odor mitigation plan, odor threshold of 2 odor units, enforcement details, and some formatting concerns. January 29th, 2020, D. Cribbs noted concerns with the adverse effect definition. Our definition was quoted for the Ontario Environmental Protection Act. November 25th, 2020, P. Gerard noted his concern that the 4 and 6 odor units are too high to be protective and need to be lowered. January 20th, 2021, P. Gerard gave a detailed presentation on the design of the ambient odor monitoring program that will help the town implement the odorous industries nuisance bylaw. Revisions include odor sampling frequency and location for quality measurements, discussion of receptor impacts and reporting, and recommendations reducing the odor unit limits to 1 odor unit, as the current ones are not protective. P. Gerard noted that complaints are the key to establishing adverse effects. And that same meeting, P. Gerard and the committee also discussed reducing the odor threshold that bylaw is using based on actual experience. P. Gerard confirmed that the most important tool is the town's complaints, and the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks sets 1 odor unit on odorous industries. He went on to say it is clear from complaints that Redekine is causing off-property impact. February 17th, 2021, Tino O'Hara reviewed the recommendations from P. Gerard regarding the final design of the odor monitoring program. These include imposing a 1 odor unit limit at sensitive and proposed sensitive uses and weekly reporting from the odor sampling contractor to staff. B. Tino O'Hara reviewed the proposed amendments he drafted to the odorous industry nuisance bylaw to modestly reduce the odor unit threshold levels. The focus of discussion between committee members and town staff related to odor strength. Town staff discussed the difficulty to support a reduction to the low odor unit level as adverse impact needs to be demonstrated and advised to keep the odor unit level at a more defensible level. That's the end of the quotes of the meetings. However, staff disagreement about odor strengths was apparent at the Pelham Council meeting on September 6, 2023, when staff summarized the minutes of settlement between the town and Redekine. Staff required that odor complaints be validated as an adverse effect by odor meeting a threshold of higher than 6 odor units on the nasal ranger. The minutes of settlement make no mention of odor measurements or odor thresholds. The Odorous Industry Nuisance Bylaw and the entire Ontario Environmental Protection Act define adverse effect as loss of enjoyment of normal use of property, among other things. I ask that Council reduce the cannabis odor unit threshold to 1 odor unit, as recommended by Phil Gerard, the odor expert hired by the town. I ask that Council use the definition of adverse effect stated in the Environmental Protection Act as loss of enjoyment of normal use of property and not validate an adverse effect by relating it to odor units. Now, if you have questions, or if you want an explanation as to what I said when I first started, I can do that too.
Let me, first of all, thank you for the presentation, and I also want to thank you publicly for the hours that you spent on the Cannabis Control Committee, you and the other members. But I know we've many times thanked Tim, but you never have thanked individual members. So again, thank you for your time spent on
Well,
that.
thank you for that recognition.
Okay. And so, council, any questions on the presentation given by Mr. Jeff? So I see none, Jim, so we're okay.
You want no explanation as to why the first statement I made?
Well,
I can explain in detail. I can give details of what other communities have done in quotes.
you know what? You're under just 5 minutes. Go ahead, and we'll give you, go ahead and do the explanation.
Minutes?
Sure.
Give me 2 minutes, okay?
Okay,
I can
go
do
ahead,
this in
sir.
2 minutes, all right. So basically, we looked at other counties, and it was only legal in the states, so that's what we had to go by. So 4 counties in Washington state have a standard of the best available control technology, which is no detectable cannabis odor outside the facility property line. Anchorage, Alaska's bylaw states a person with a normal sense of smell must not be able to detect marijuana at any lot line of a commercial property. The Sacramento, California ordinance states the methods will be implemented to prevent odors generated from the cultivation and storage of marijuana from being detected outside the buildings on the cultivation site. The Hollister, California standard is that odors generated inside the marijuana business are not detected on the outside of the marijuana business. Now, the county of Denver, Colorado, that will take a minute. Do I have another minute?
Go ahead.
Okay. The County of Denver, Colorado's health rules and regulations governing nuisance odors states in Section 4.1b, odor mitigation practices shall be based on the best control technologies and best management practices commonly deployed to control odor emissions from similar activities and sources by other similar businesses with the same industry type. Section 4.2a(c) states, if a facility exceeds either, and note this, either the dilution or complaint threshold as detailed in Section 1.3a(1) and 2 of this rule, the department will notify the owner or operator of the facility that it is required to submit an odor control plan within a reasonable amount of time. So Section 1 states, facilities that emit odorous contaminants are detected when 1 volume of odorous air has been diluted with 7 or more volumes of odor-free air as measured by any instrument, device, or method designated by the Colorado Air Pollution Division to be used in determination of the intensity of an odor and in the enforcement of the Colorado Air Quality Commission Regulation 2. And the second one, and this is key, facilities about which the department receives 5 or more complaints from individuals representing separate households or businesses within a 30-day period. So thank you for letting me complete that. Appreciate it.
And thank you for bringing the information to council. Thank you. Again, I see Councilor Nesnick. Jim, we do have a question.
Thank you for your presentation. Just in your research, did it mention anything about what happens when the threshold is deemed to be exceeded, or like were there penalties or any comment on any of those sorts of things? Like, you know, we can put all the laws we want into place, but if they're, you know, if they just ignore that, then what were their steps, or did there any mention of a penalty, a fine, or where that would go?
There were, but you have to appreciate, this is just information I gathered like 5 years ago.
Okay,
And it's really interesting. I've been working on this for 5.5 years.
all right.
It took me 5 years studying to be a dentist. So I've been working on this that long, but
Oh.
I forget, you know,
Okay,
everything
well,
else.
maybe when we do some of our, you know, get our staff working on that, that can be one of the things that they can investigate as well.
That's one item our committee worked on, and
Right.
it already developed. There's a whole series of fines, but
Okay.
that never, I don't think it's been brought to council. But
Okay.
Anyway, it's there. It's just a matter of reviewing it.
Perfect, good to know, thank you.
And Councilor Eckert.
Just to comment on Councilor Nisnick's question, and I don't want to step on the toes of our legal expert, but anytime there's a bylaw, the penalty section is always separate. So it goes hand in hand. You pass the bylaw, you pass the penalty section, so that then they're enforceable. Having a bylaw that says you can't do this, but without a penalty to go with it is useless. So just to sort of answer your question, that's the way I think it would go.
Okay.
So there would be penalty sections, but that's not what you're interested in looking up. You're interested in looking up what's the regulation on odor. You can't do it. Separate, you look up the penalty
That's
section.
right. Really, I'm commenting on the, the motion that was made.
Right.
But we must have spent 3 or 4 meetings developing that information.
Yeah.
So it's there. I could give it to you, but I'm sure, you could find it too.
So I just wanted to help you answer the question and maybe pass on some information to you.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Yep, thanks. Any other questions first? Nope, we're good now, Mr. Jeffs. Thank you. Turn to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Eckhart. Be it resolved that Council receive the delegation from Dr. Jim Jeffs regarding the cannabis odor unit threshold for information. To you, Mr. Mayor, for comment and discussion.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments or discussion on the presentation? Not seeing any. All those in favor of receiving for information? Thank you. Any against? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings you to your next delegation, which is Mr. Mark Burrell. And he's here to also speak about the odor control of cannabis production. Mr. Burrell, thank you. You may go to the podium, and I do remind you have 5 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and a resident from Welland, I believe.
Yes, correct.
We're always like to welcome the residents from Welland to council.
We're good neighbors. Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, staff, and fellow residents. My name is Mark Brule, and again, I'm here to talk about the cannabis odor in the community, both yours and mine. It's clear that this cannabis odor issue has been an ongoing thing over the past number of years, and whatever steps have been previously taken have been obviously insufficient to control it effectively enough for those living nearby to once again enjoy the outdoor air. I'm not going to go into the details. I thank Mr. Jeffs for all of the work that he's brought to the table and the information he's brought today. I guess he's playing the role of the mind, and I'm going to be playing the role of the heart, I guess, a little today. I live on the edge of Pelham Township. The end of our property is the beginning of Pelham Township on the west side of Balsam Street, due east of Redecan, stone's throw from there. Our experience has been one of disappointment, frustration, and even embarrassment. We love having our windows open in the spring and fall, and also in the evenings as the weather cools, like last night, which we had to keep them closed. However, the cannabis odor has been so prevalent that leaving windows open would result in the entire inside of our household smelling like cannabis. We've actually delayed redoing our deck because we don't sit outside like we used to. We have had guests who, upon their arrival in our driveways, have said, "What is that smell?" I've watched a Pelham bylaw officer belittle my wife for her persistence in reporting incidents of cannabis odor, and that was very troublesome. The reporting system, starts with an attestation that you be willing to testify in court, which serves as, I think, as a significant deterrent to people reporting the incident, because the first thing they look at is that, would you be willing to testify in court? And I don't know how many people bail out because of that, and I don't really know that information, but it caused us to pause before we proceeded as well. So at the very least, this has been a significantly unpleasant experience for us. And as I consider my own experience, which I know is also shared by other people, I can't help but think about what actually makes a community healthy and whole. What is the experience one would want to have in their own community? People nowadays have greater choice as to where they're going to live. And would anyone choose to live in an area saturated with the smell of cannabis? I wonder what the response would be, in this room if it was the smell of raw sewage in a subdivision. If there would be, well, let's have 5 years of meetings and talk about it. Or how quickly would something like that be rectified? I would really honestly ask, what is the responsibility of this elected council of leaders in bringing and maintaining wellness here in Pelham and in my edge of Welland for that matter? And really, what does this council want said about this town to other towns, to other cities, and to other places? So I just really want to appeal to you to take to heart the importance of both the physical and emotional well-being of your constituents. And I'm requesting, as a Welland resident, albeit, but as one who shares the experience of those in Pelham, that you take the necessary steps to reduce the cannabis odor levels to a point where we can feel like our communities have been restored and we can once again enjoy our backyards and open windows, and to do so with greater haste. Thank you.
Okay, sir, thank you for your presentation. Before I open up the council, I'd like to, I'm going to ask the CAO, when this town was racking up hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal bills, I believe this council asked your council, the Council of Welland, to join the fight monetarily. Mr. CAO, what was the result of that request?
It was politely declined.
Yeah. Just to set the record straight, so we are carrying the torch here, and of course I'm very good friends with Frank, but just to be sure, we've invested close to $250,000, almost $500,000 in legal fees. So, and you're right, don't get me wrong, we're not there yet, but and we do appreciate your presentation.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Any questions to the presenter? Councilor Hildebrand.
It's not necessarily a question through you, Mr. Mayor. It's a comment. Obviously, you realize I live very close to the facility as well. I just live south of it. You live east of it. And I sympathize with the odor that you're encountering. And this council is going to take the action required to address this issue. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. I don't know that I can apologize personally for Welland City Council.
No need, no need.
But I really do appreciate the ball moving forward and the opportunity to present to you.
And again, thank you for joining us this morning.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I turn to the clerk. Oh, first of all, was there any other questions? No. Okay, thank you. Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Niznik, seconded by Councillor Hildebrandt. Be resolved that Council receive the delegation from Mark Burrell regarding the odor control of cannabis production for information. To you, Mr. Mayor, for any discussion and comment.
Thank you. And one last time, any further discussion or comments? Not seeing any. Ask for the vote on accepting for information. None against. Motion is carried.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does bring us to our resolution to move in camera. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Kerr, seconded by Councillor Wink. Be it resolved that the next portion of the meeting be closed to the public in order to consider a matter under Section 239(2) of the Municipal Act as follows. F, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. One item, cannabis. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, any discussion on moving in camera? Not seeing any, I ask for the vote. All those in favor? I see none opposed. Residents, we're going to have to excuse us. We will be moving in camera for the next session.
Thank you, and if